I am convinced that this is more than just the introduction of the World Wide Web or the introduction of the smart firm. That definitely changed the way law firms access information and practice.
My name's Tom Baldwin. This is Overruled by Data, the podcast for law firms looking to start their data journey or accelerate the journey they're already on. Brought to you by Integrata. Today's guest is someone who played a pivotal role, not just in transforming his own firm, but in kicking off my own personal journey into legal data strategy. Robert Sartin is at Frost Brown Todd and one of the rare law firm leaders who didn't wait for a crisis or a consultant to tell him that data mattered. He just knew it. Years ago, Robert actually came to us with a challenge. He wanted to make data work for him. And at that moment, became the spark that launched my own career into data. He's super progressive, pragmatic, and deeply thoughtful about how to lead change in a traditional industry. I'm thrilled to have him here to talk about what he did and where he sees the industry headed with data. Welcome.
Tom, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Just a little bit of background. Obviously, you've had a very successful career as a litigator in leadership and in firm management. As you look across those experiences, what shaped your journey and interest in firm-wide innovation and strategic thinking?
Yeah, we're all sort of products of our environment. You become who we are over our own personal journeys. And undergrad degree was economics and finance, 3-year career in banking before heading into law, and kind of preparing for this, looking back on it, I think the economics side has always had me be a little more big picture, right? Studying supply and demand and its impact on price, particularly macroeconomics. So that helps you focus on, all right, what is the managing and using data to determine impact on strategy, what we're trying to accomplish from a business purpose. I think that's the background that sort of prepared me for moving into this role. As in our parlance, I'm chair of our firm, and my task is strategic direction. And then that in practice, did a lot of work in distress M&A, a lot of time in bankruptcy. That's kind of the litigation side of it. So those backgrounds, and then the banking piece, right? A lot of financial analysis work. So you're studying data. So that background, I think, helped put me in a position to understand ultimately how important it would be for a law firm, or particularly our law firm, and what we're trying to accomplish.
So, Robert, your firm is in a unique position. First off, having someone like yourself at the helm who has a business background. Not every lawyer does. One of my favorite quotes from a partner at another firm, she said, I went into the practice of law because I was told there'd be no math. Clearly not your background. And right. You also have a leadership structure where it affords you the opportunity to focus strategically. And you've got another person on the team that can worry about operations. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, happy to. And just as a quick aside, I mean, I benefit from having a business background, but you don't obviously have to have a business background to be a strategic thinker and understand the importance of strategy, understand the importance of data in implementation or the tactical side of executing on your strategy. Yes, I do think I personally benefit and our firm benefits from having sort of a divide of roles and responsibilities, especially given our size. So as chair of the firm, I am tasked with strategy, direction, strategic implementation, and then I have the benefit of Adam Hall, who is our CEO, or in most big law parlance, managing partner. We operate as co-leads, and that is a benefit of our structure. So I can kind of point to the need for this and the need for that, and then he and I can work together on how are we going to get it implemented and where are we going to hire resource or apply resource to help us accomplish our goals.
As you look at the industry, many managing partners tend to stick with traditional playbooks, right? The whole industry is based on precedent, right? Which is a backwards look. What led you to take a more progressive, data-forward approach in leading Frost Brown to where it is today?
Again, drawing a little bit on my background, both in economics and finance, and then the time in banking, and then the nature of my practice, right? When you're dealing with distress M&A, you're looking for solutions and what's causing the problem. When you're headed to bankruptcy court, what's causing the operational problem? All of that helped position me to be a bit of a strategic thinker, back, like I said a minute ago, thinking strategically and externally and kind of at a macro level. So that background helped me. Now, you don't have to have that background. I think everybody has to understand that competing in law as a law firm, a little bit different if you're a solo practitioner, right? But regardless of where you are in that spectrum of partnership to smaller partnerships up to the larger partnerships, it is a hyper competitive environment, right? With ever increasing demands. We're going to talk about this a little bit later as we go along, but technology is changing the landscape. So you have to have a strategy and that what do I mean by that is, all right, where is our place in the market? Do we like where we are? If we like where we are, what are we doing to enhance that position? Certainly protect it, but try to enhance it. If we don't really like where we are, we want to be a better version of ourselves. What things are we going to do to change and where we are? And then data becomes a critical piece of this. My partners sometimes joke with me. I do speak often with the kind of the MBA speak, they say. But, there's the old cliche, you can't manage what you're not measuring. If you're trying to make decisions about how do we want to do something better or how do we want to do something differently, you have to have the underlying data to help you make decisions about that. So, I don't think I'm a great visionary. I just think I have a basic understanding of it's really important to be capturing the information. So what is all of that, right? If you're trying to incentivize behavior and get people to work together on teams, well, then you need to give them information to understand, well, who has expertise and how often have they done a particular litigation matter, a particular transaction that would warrant me having them on their team. If you're trying to respond to an RFP in the marketplace and they're looking for speed, time is of the essence in those, right? So all of that is examples of how important it is. And I just had sort of the benefit of seeing that and thinking that and knew when I moved into this role in 2018, we had to be better at it.
Speaking of sort of that move in 2018, if you go back to that moment in time when you had this sort of call to action, so to speak, well, for lack of a better term, and we started working together, what was the catalyst? Was there a specific instance or situation that realized like, okay, we've got to really solve this in a more material way?
Yeah. I don't know that I would characterize it as a catalytic event, if you will, but what was selected by our partnership into this role in January of 18, immediately began assessing, okay, where are we? Like I was talking about a minute ago in the marketplace. Looking back, we had a nice, 10-year run. Parts of our firm have a 100-year history. Well, we're kind of a creation of combinations. We'd had this nice 10-year run. I'm seeing the market increasing in its competition. Alternative legal service providers are starting to work their way in. The impact of technology, the fact that the larger firms were starting to move into secondary and tertiary markets. So assessing the marketplace, where we were in the marketplace, but I knew we had to have a strategy as a law firm of which data is a component. And right, to me, I'm a big believer in if you're trying to talk to your current clients about why they should stay with you or give you additional projects, or you're talking about potentially new clients, why pick Frost Brown Todd over many other great choices? You have to have a value proposition. And to understand what your value proposition is, you have to really have an understanding from your data. Okay, yeah, if we think we're an energy firm, or if we think we're a manufacturing firm, just how much of it are we doing? What is the nature of those projects, right? What's the right rate associated with that? Where are the margins on it? I can go on and on about the things that you want to capture and analyze. So I saw pretty quickly we needed a more defined and targeted value proposition in the marketplace. And to be able to then put that in place and tactically execute on it, we were too dispersed in where to gather information and where it was held within the law firm, right? And we needed to centralize that, be able to better capture it, find a way, we'll talk about this a little later, to capture historical stuff and then pull it into your proverbial data lake, because that takes time and resource. So that's where we were in 18, and that's why I called you for some help.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey. So interestingly enough, we hear a lot about Gen AI, and a lot of firms are leaning into that, but it's still somewhat rare to see managing partners like yourself out in front of and thinking and leading the firm through a data transformation. For firms that are like, hey, I think I want to get into this, but I don't really know how to get started, what advice would you give to other law firm leaders who may see the value in data but don't know how to get going?
Yeah. Well, as a silly illustration, to walk up a hill, you have to take the first step. So no matter what, you've got to convince yourself of the importance of it and then begin to act on it. All businesses are both resource limited ultimately, right? We don't have infinite resource. And then related to that are the competition around resource and priorities and strategic priorities. And we only have so many hours in the day. So you have to make a decision. Is this important? I can tell you, I believe it is mission critical to the execution of any form of strategy. If you are not capturing your data and evaluating your data and putting it in a centralized place where your partners can get at it and understand it. So it's capturing it and then being able to use it in a user-friendly way, then you are not going to be able to execute on your strategic plan. Again, I want to reemphasize, I think every firm must have a very clear plan and a clear understanding of what they're trying to accomplish from a strategy perspective. And I've said it a couple of times, data is an important piece of that. And then as just a quick aside, and I know we may talk about it a little more later, the AI thing, they're in the bell curve. There are some people like, oh, this really isn't that big a deal. At the other end of the spectrum, there are going to be winners and losers, and I'll get to where I think about this in a minute. The middle, everybody's trying to figure it out, right? It's in the headlines every day. I am convinced that this is more than just the introduction of the World Wide Web or the introduction of the smartphone. That definitely changed the way law firms access information and practice. What I mean by that is here, I think at the end of the day, there will be winners and losers with respect to the use of AI. Our clients are going to have expectations around how we're using it. Those expectations will include that they expect us to be more efficient, right? We all know they're trying to manage cost. Typically, legal expense inside a business is a cost. So they're trying to fix, control, and decrease that cost. They're going to expect us to use technology, and they're not going to let us fully capture all of the profit or the opportunity side of that. They're going to expect us to be partners with them and pass some of that along. In some ways, some of them may be unfair, where we don't get to keep any of that, and they're going to expect that entire benefit. So all of that wraps together in a firm must have a technology strategy, capturing its data, using its data, and then AI is going to be a component of that. And I am one of these, and I may be proved wrong, but I'm out there on the end of the spectrum looking out 5, 6, 7 years from now. I think it's going to completely change the pricing model and the leverage model of the AmLaw 200. And those that figure it out will be the ones that not only survive but thrive. And those that don't, I think, will be left behind or won't be here.
A couple of things I want to just kind of double click on that you talked about. Going back to your earlier comments, and I'm not saying this to pander to you, but having had experience and exposure to a lot of firms, not a lot of firms have a written strategy, and you all did. And it was a very helpful aid because we were able to align a lot of our initiatives against those strategic goals. So it wasn't done in a vacuum. The second thing that I really admired about your firm is the discipline around like knowing where you were in the market. I can't tell you how many firms I've seen that like I see, oh, tell me who you think your peers are. And I hate to say it, but they're grossly kind of like stepping outside of who their actual peers are. It's aspirational. And you all knowing kind of where you fit in the marketplace and where you want to go with the things that you're great at, that you want to double down on, the things that you want to get better at. Being honest about that is not easy to do at a firm, but I think it helped really cut through a lot of the noise, not just with our project, but I assume other things you do at the firm.
Yeah, you have to conduct reflection activities and you have to be self-aware. And it's okay to have some aspiration or think a little better of yourself than you may actually be, but those aspirations have to be reasonably achievable. And I will come back to it. I'm a big believer you got to have a strategic plan. It has to be in writing. You need to go through a strategic planning process. And that's a world unto itself on who, your various stakeholders and buy in and build consensus around the plan. And we all know lawyers, every lawyer is going to think differently about an issue. So building consensus to get to a written plan that then you can begin to execute on. And then the final thing I'll say is, while that is ultimately probably easier said than done, I do tell our partners anybody could draft a strategic plan. Very few people can actually execute on one. So you have to go through the hard process of putting a good plan in place, and then you have to have relentless discipline in the pursuit of your plan. And then you have to kind of poke your head up every 3-4 years and do an additional reflection activity and see what adjustments you're making to the waypoints. My personal belief is you have a 10-year plan that you're assessing in the short term, midterm, and kind of long term.
You went back to buy-in and consensus building in a law firm that's difficult with a partnership model or any version of a partnership model, right? And so looking back at this, I was looking at my notes. We were in 2020 when we started talking, way before data and AI were at the kind of popularity they are now. When you went back to the firm and said, hey, I really want to, like your firm has made a substantial investment in people and technology, and I have to imagine a ton of sort of political capital to get all these things pushed forward. When you initially presented this to the firm, how did you get buy-in? Going back to speaking to other managing partners like yourself, how would you suggest they build buy-in to move forward with efforts like this? Were there skeptics, and how did you kind of overcome that?
Yeah, I've got the scars on my back to prove it's not easy. But, first and foremost, anybody in a leadership position has to have a vision and have a plan. And it can't just be theirs pulled out of thin air. So you've got to spend some time reflecting and talking and pulling feedback in from various stakeholders. And they can't be just the people that think like you. So you've got to ultimately come up with your own thoughts and plans and then test those. And you do have to implement process. I'm a big believer in, like we did with you and firemen and technology as an initial step. I'm a big believer in using outside resources and consultants. And we had an advisor that did an effective job of not helping create a plan that was that person's plan that we were then to implement, but help work with us to come to our own plan. And we've talked for hours about it because it took months and even a year really to develop the strategic plan we were going to use for the next 10 years. But you go out, you gather stakeholders from different constituencies, a mix of demographics, practice demographics, age demographics, geographic demographics. The art, maybe more than the science is, it can't become unwieldy. You've got to ultimately get to a group that can be managed, and then you go through this reflection activity. Who are we? Where are we in the marketplace? Test that a little bit. Where do we want to be? What's reasonably achievable if we want to have some aspiration, as I was talking about earlier? And then ultimately, you start putting a draft together, and that's where the really hard work begins, because then you have to go out and convince the rest of the team to buy into this and to lead and to follow. And that all goes to change management at the end of the day. And that's a world unto itself, obviously, but the simple, at risk of grossly oversimplifying change management, is you have to build consensus and buy-in. And then a little bit of how to do that is to show early returns and the value in it. So bringing it back to, sort of your podcast here and data and the importance of prioritizing the capture of data so that we can then use that data to make decisions as we go to execute on our strategic plan. The sooner you can pull some things together, make it usable, functional, showing how people are using and applying it, and it's improving their own practices, you build consensus and momentum and buy into the plan. And then tying that back to the strategic plan at large, if you think about it from your macro plan, you have certain tactics, data being a part of the tactics, all of that, same thing. You're executing on the strategic plan and change management, showing them, hey, because we're now doing this and we're tactically executing on this strategy, here are the early returns we're seeing. Promoting that helps you achieve buy-in. And that is easier said than done, by the way.
Yeah, it is easier said, absolutely. Because even the best plans, you're going to have skeptics regardless, right? There's no way around that. So if we pivot a little bit and talk about sort of lessons learned, the things that went well, didn't go well, pivots you made, This might be surprising to you. We never admitted to this, but you were the first firm to ever come to us to do data strategy work. So we were kind of coming up with it as we were going along. It was our first time doing it. And you were one of the very first firms that we know of on the planet that really took a measured approach to data. And so there was a lot of things that we all kind of learned together. If you reflect back on kind of those early stages, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Maybe have spent a little more time in the early stages on thinking about what the outputs were. And what do I mean by that? Maybe a little more, a tighter discipline on, okay, exactly what are we intending to do with the data, which would then have maybe better framed some of the early inputs and made us a little faster and more efficient. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and I tend to, not trying to self-laud, but one of my strengths is a little more big picture, kind of having a general idea of where we need to go and some things we need to do differently, and then I want to just get it done and expect that we will in it know to get there, right? And all right, I knew we needed data. Let's capture it. Let's get it in the data lake. Let's start figuring out little dashboards and things that we can create. A little more discipline on the front end of exactly what we're intending to use it for, I think, in retrospect, would have made the entire process a little easier and faster.
It's interesting, Robert, that you came to that conclusion, because in our business now, that is exactly the approach we take. We don't start an engagement until we know that what is the specific outcome that you want to start with. If you're just doing data for data's sake, that's a really difficult place to be in, right?
Right.
And this goes back to sort of helping, kind of ward off a little bit of the skeptics. If I can do a data effort and then turn around and show something meaningful and valuable that's tangible, that starts to show value quicker, and you get the buy-in sooner. It's an interesting parallel that we both came to the same conclusion without ever talking about it in advance. That's funny. So in a similar vein, were there any particular challenges you ran into, whether it was technical, organizational, or cultural, that if you were looking at advising another leader of a law firm that they should be prepared for?
Yeah, that question goes a little bit back to the resource limitation. All businesses, again, have finite resources, and the flip side of that same coin, if you will, is the prioritization, right? So I definitely think you have to understand data is a component of a lot of things, and so you then have to value the priority of it. And that goes back to the prior question, frankly, on be a little more narrow than broad. And, okay, what am I trying to gather and what am I going to use it for? And then you have to lean into it. And that's back to the change management piece. You have to convince your management committees or your different project teams, this is what we need, this is why we need it, this is what we're intending to do with it, and lean into that. And you do learn about your firm's culture and their comedian who. Lawyers tend to be a little bit resistant to change. You got to then kind of give them the vision for it. So that's the culture piece, and then building excitement and enthusiasm around it. Technical challenges will be what they'll be, right? And that's ultimately addressed through either human capital or financial capital to improve your technical capabilities. But back to buy-in. If you're not bought in on the importance of it, no one else is going to buy into the importance of it as a leader of a law firm or a Greek, etc.
Love that. So we've talked about sort of lessons learned. Let's look at the other side of that coin. Again, candidly, watching you and the firm evolve and the group you've put in place and the success they've achieved, what are you most proud of in terms of what Frost Brown Todd has done using data to this point?
Yeah, it's definitely working. I kind of joke with our colleagues that I am not cocky enough to claim causation. If the financial results are a direct cause of what we've done around strategy and what we've done around the use of data, I am confident enough to claim correlation. And
fair.
If you're looking at our results, there is a correlation to having the strategy and the use of data, and we are delivering better results to our clients, which is ultimately what it's all about. As a professional service firm, particularly a law firm, it's about client results, right? And so how do you get to better client results? Well, better teams. Well, teams work better together when they understand, all right, just how many hours have we done this before, this type of project? Makes you better at project management, makes you better at pricing. So I'm very proud of the financial results we've achieved and what we're accomplishing around our strategy and the use of data.
And I know your team is very wisely, they're always very vague when they speak at events to talk about specific initiatives, because a lot of the work you've done is very much secret sauce. And we'll get to this in a little bit. Gen AI has been very work product focused, but a lot of the work you did up to this point, we weren't even touching documents. It's been all the business data. And there's a lot of secret sauce behind that as well, because you've mentioned pricing and things like that several times. But is there a specific project or initiative or maybe a new capability that stands out in your mind as something that you're really most proud of?
Well, there's several things. I mean, there's a lot I'm proud of about our team, and some of it maybe is a little bit secret sauce. But one I think that we've talked about, if we haven't, I'm not afraid to talk about. But I alluded to this earlier, right? When you start a data-oriented project, you're beginning to capture data. What you want to do is capture as much as you can that's immediately available, and certainly capture everything going forward. Well, what about all of that historical stuff, right? So transactions or litigation matters that you're trying to evaluate how they are applicable or can make us better today. Well, how do you bring that into the system? And a lot of times, yeah, you can see the files and the papers of the files, but the human knowledge associated with that. Here's really the importance of that, what we achieve, blah, blah, blah. So we, through our team, human nature to be competitive. I'm kind of a believer in gamification. We created, and we sort of do it every year. We call it the Amazing Race, off the TV show. And we create teams, and you advance by the number of historical matters that you put into the system. And, we have sort of a template of what the questions that we're looking for related to certain matters. And then it incentivizes everybody from our LPAs to our associates to our partners, because they want to, in the background of what we're doing every day to deliver client work, they want to see their team sort of advance and be the winner and get the prize. And you do that over a couple of years, and all of a sudden you've brought an enormous amount of historical context into your data lake. So that's one of the things I'm kind of proud about. And it's been very useful. I mean, the results are then when we're going into our, what we call foundation, and we're looking at what's our experience profile. It's made this better at all those things I'm talking about: pricing, project management, response to RFPs, building, as we're growing, right? We all know what's happening in the MLaw 200. Everybody's growing either through combination or organically by opening in new markets and building, if you're not growing, you're declining. Well, integration's key to that, right? So if you're trying to deliver the best value to clients, you've got to have a team-oriented strategy. Well, for teams to know one another, you got to create an opportunity for them to figure out, and I talked about this before, by centralized place where them to literally go see someone's true experience profile. And yeah, they say they're this type of attorney and they say they've done these transactions, and yeah, you can talk to them and trust them and all that. That's a given. But to actually then see it in the data, it helps drive that. Or we all get the call for something somewhat unique, right? Who's done this? Who has this expertise? And instead of the broad, pardon the interruption, email that's sent out across, you can actually just go in the foundation, and within a button or two click, wow, yeah, we've done this, and this person's done it a lot, or we haven't. And then it helps you evaluate, okay, if we haven't, then what do we do about it? You can tell I'm a big believer.
100%.
I'm drunk on my own Kool-Aid of the importance of data and tied to strategy.
One of the other data points that you could use looking from the outside in is, your point earlier, every firm, I don't care if your PPP is $9 million or $900,000 a year, you have limitations. There's a threshold of how much you can invest in any one particular area. Right. And what I've seen again, from a distance, what I've noticed is your firms continue to evolve the team and invest and double down on resources in certain areas, which at least from the outside looking in tells me that it's working, because firms are not going to continue to invest in an area they're not seeing a return on.
That's generally true. It depends on how long your lead time is or your expected return on investment, how long but you're generally right. Yeah, if it's not working, people can turn off the investment, move on to something else. I've said it before, you need to be committed to it. You got to take the first step. You do have to invest in it. It's basic business. You have to invest to grow. And that investment is a commitment to the investment in, technology generally, and as part of what we're talking about, data, and that's financial capital and human capital. And then you're trying to measure, are we growing and are we achieving return on investment in that investment? I was joking about this earlier. You may not always see a direct line causation, but you need to be able to confidently draw some correlations. Is that helpful?
100, very helpful. Okay, so Robert, as we kind of look at the last section of our time together, I really wanted to get your take on the future and vantage point you see where the legal industry is headed with AI, data, and analytics.
Yeah. In my mind, I sort of categorize it into at least two buckets, if not three, and probably is three. When you're thinking about these issues, you've got to generally be thinking about compliance. That's one bucket, or vertical, right? Are we using it ethically, legally, etc.? The spirit of your question then is there's the deliverable, the external, and how do we use this to deliver work product and monetize? We talked about that a little bit earlier on how I'm a believer it is going to change value and pricing and all of that. And then the third is, how are we using it ourselves internally to actually be more efficient, more productive in what we do every day? And that's across functions. That's the use of AI inside your marketing departments, whether that's first cuts and PowerPoints for the pitch, responses to RFPs, it's in the HR function, and how can we better manage, capture, keep track of, and there's a lot in that, right? Within our hiring processes, our whole talent management, AI is just unlimited in its capabilities to be more efficient than tracking results, doing analytics that can be converted to predictives. Yeah, we all have our models for who's the ideal hire for a function within FBT, but you can actually use AI to study that historically to then become predictive to make you better at, which then makes you more targeted in who you're going after and then what you're doing. I mean, I can go on hours and hours and hours about the ultimate opportunities here. And then just to be practical about it, you can't just get lost in all the what ifs and the why. It's back to the priorities, and it's back to the limitation of resources. You got to see this unlimited world of possibilities and then pick the things that you think are going to be the most important to you and your organization. And you got to dial in on them and you got to start making it happen.
And when you think about the future for you, we just talked about the industry. To the extent you can share sort of your vision for Frost Brown Todd, what do you want the industry to think of when they think of Frost Brown Todd 5 years from now?
I think we aspire to be a national firm, continue to grow. We're close to building out past super regional to truly national. We're not looking to ultimately become an AmLaw 50 firm and grow around the globe. We're going to build a national firm focused on more of the middle market economy. That's back to what we were talking about earlier, sort of self-awareness of who we are and who we're competing against. We want to be respected. There's places for all sorts of law firms in the space, right? Ethically, clients are adverse, and so we want to be there with our peer firms and respected. And most importantly, we're out to deliver great client service and then have a fantastic team-oriented FBT way, if you will, culture. That's who we are and what we're doing. We're having a lot of fun doing it.
Absolutely. And so parting words here a little bit, a lot of firms are really interested in getting started. And they're going back to sort of the same place you were in 2021. What's one piece of advice you'd give another law firm leader? They understand the importance of data, but they just haven't started yet.
Yeah, I made the joke earlier in our conversation, the silly illustration, if you're looking at a hill to walk up, you got to take the first step if you're going to get to the top. So spend some personal time reflecting if you're a leader in a firm. Where are we? Where do I think we need to go? Check that with a group of your core stakeholders, and then get after it. And, the other thing I said earlier too is spend some time, it specifically is in the context of data and use of data. Spend some real time thinking about, okay, what do I want to use it for? And am I capturing it in a way where I can use it for that? And those are your first steps, right? What am I going to use it for, and focus on the outputs? That'll help you then, all right, how do I gather it through the inputs? And then you start getting to okay, what are we capable of today? That's the resource assessment. And then put it in the priority spectrum of other things. But I've joked along the way, I think it's mission critical for anybody that's going to continue to deliver great client service to have a strategy and a plan, have real self-awareness about their actual value proposition in the marketplace, and then they need to be executing tactically on delivering that value proposition. And use of data is a key piece of that assessment and that actual tactical execution.
Robert, thank you so much for your time. Is there any other topics or thoughts that you want to leave our audience before we disembark for the weekend?
I always, we joked about this a little along the way. That's why I get out of bed in the morning. I like to think strategically. I'm competitive. I like playing on a team. And here at Team FBT, part of my function is what can we do to be a better team, more competitive in the marketplace. So I enjoy these conversations is the point of that. Happy to have it with you. I've enjoyed our relationship along the way. I'm sure we'll find continued ways to work together.
Absolutely, and Robert. Really appreciate your time.
All of these thoughts I've pontificated on, somebody cares about. If not, they can turn it off.
No, it's been great. You've been awesome. I really appreciate your time, Robert. Thank you so much.
All right, Tom. See ya.
That's a wrap for this episode of Overruled by Data. If this podcast resonated with you, if you took one or two things away from it, you want to hear more from law firm leaders that have been there and done that, hit the follow button.